Okay, so I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. We're truly blessed to have a wide range of people with a wide range of backgrounds and information to share with us. And I think you're going to find that tonight's presentations will be very informative. Some of it's going to be difficult, but this topic is something that is serious, significant, impacts us in so many ways in our lives at all levels, emotionally, physically, and I think it's definitely a topic that we need to speak up more about in our community and try to find ways at various levels to try to see what we can do to alleviate, reduce, fight back on this issue of gender violence in our community. Not that it's a problem specific to our community, but it's something that all communities are dealing with across the country, North America, what have you. But in our own small way, in our own small part of the world, let's see what we can do to try to make lives better for those that are victims of this terrible plight, this epidemic, as many of us feel it should be recognized as. So just before I start, though, I'm going to do a land acknowledgement. So if you just take a moment, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. Please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we are and can each, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So we're just going to take a moment. Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to get started. As this is virtual, sometimes virtual can be the Wild West of activity. And so we just want to make sure that we're all in a spirit here of respectfulness, respectful coexistence, so to speak. And, if there is a situation where I feel there might be some harm being caused or people that are out of line, Reagan will just remove you from the town hall. Simple as that. Okay. And I haven't had to do that yet. This is our 5th town hall. So hopefully I don't have to do anything like that today. And we can all, be respectful of each other and come to appreciate what we're hearing from our various speakers who have taken time out of their schedule to prepare for tonight and offer us some information about what they do and this issue that we're dealing with. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Christine Taylor. Christine is a registered social worker with a Master of Social Work from Wilfrid Laurier University. She's worked on the front lines with victims of intimate partner violence for 13 years and is currently the program manager of the Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Treatment Center of Waterloo Region at St. Mary's Hospital. And if you want to know more about Christine, you can check the website as well, where we have more detailed information. So Christine, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Okay, you're welcome. Thanks for that introduction, Rob. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I wanted to just start out by sharing a little bit about our team at St. Mary's and what we're about and what we do, just briefly. So the Sexual Assault Domestic Violence team at St. Mary's is a team of nurses and social workers who respond 24/7 to cases of sexual assault, intimate partner violence, and human trafficking at St. Mary's Hospital and Cambridge Hospital. So when people present to emerge in that situation, our team arrives within 45 minutes and offers a number of care options, including crisis support, medical options, forensic evidence collection, and many other options that people can choose from. And at that point, because we're lucky enough to be the only center of 37 in Ontario where both a social worker and nurse present to Emerge, that social worker who met you that day offers follow-up counseling for you if you want it. So you're immediately connected and follows you through your healing journey from there. People can also be referred through our office if they've had that experience within the last year, and they will be matched with a counselor who can see them around their intimate partner violence, sexual assault, or human trafficking experience. So we have both a hospital part of our program and then also the community-based program, and we're part of the Family Violence Project, which you'll hear more about in this program, but essentially a whole group of co-located services, one-stop service access for intimate partner violence. So that's very nice for victims and service providers helping us work together. So I wanted to just really talk about intimate partner violence in 2023, because I think for us, we often notice a real misconception in the community that intimate partner violence perhaps is, a quiet, private thing happening behind closed doors where women are predominantly women, but of course people of all genders face intimate partner violence, are coming in with minor injuries and, are easily treated and off they go. We have to tell you that in 2023, we are seeing a really alarming number of cases where people are presenting to Emerge with very serious injuries. So 15, 20 years ago, to have a case where somebody was forcibly confined or strangled, where there was sexual exploitation or assault with a weapon, something of this nature, was fairly novel or uncommon, somewhat unusual. And unfortunately, those cases are ones we are routinely seeing in the emergency department these days. And Waterloo Region is not alone with that. I was just at a meeting of the 37 managers across Ontario, and across Ontario, we're called SAT teams, are seeing these really significant injuries and a lot of very violent intimate partner violence cases coming into the emergency department. We've really noticed this in particular since COVID, post-COVID, in the past 1 to 2 years ago, 1 to 2 years, this increase. And I think it also speaks to the number of women who are dying at the hand of their intimate partner at the hands of their intimate partner. That's something that Jen Hutton is going to speak more about later in the program. But these kinds of serious injuries, debilitating injuries, are really, unfortunately, something we're seeing routinely now, and that's relatively new. The other thing I wanted to mention is that, and I'm, in a way, I apologize for having to be so detailed and graphic at the outset of this evening, and I don't do it to be provocative or alarmist, but I think people need to understand the truth of what we're seeing in terms of intensity and levels of violence in hospital in order to really be taking this social issue as seriously as we need to be. The other thing that I wanted to talk about the debilitating piece. So, when advocates say that intimate partner violence is now a public health crisis, I think, it's absolutely true. We are dealing with situations where women are facing really debilitating injury, long-lasting debilitating injuries as a result of the assaults that they're dealing with. And within the past 6 to 8 months, I can think of cases where women have dealt with stroke as a result of strangulation, amputation as a result of not being able to access medical care in their abusive relationship, facial disfigurement, It has just become an absolute health crisis from our perspective, and it's not when as Jen will say later on in the program, when you look at the number of women, the femicide numbers, these incidents are consistent with that and what we're seeing across the province that way. Fortunately, we're at the point where 71 municipalities have declared intimate partner violence an epidemic, which is wonderful. And, it's only as a result of the hard work of local communities advocating and pushing this agenda forward. So the other piece I just wanted to talk about is youth dating and intimate partner violence. I think we need to recognize that intimate partner violence is happening across the lifespan. Youth are presenting to hospital as early as age 13. We have clients age 13, 14 coming in as a result of violence in their relationships. And we're dealing with the complexities. Youth are dealing with the complexities of things like online harassment, online stalking, sharing sexualized photos, dynamics of sexual exploitation through relationships they've created online or that have started online. So these are all the kind of different dynamics and dimensions of intimate partner violence that youth are experiencing online and in person. And, I think the time is now. The time has already passed, but the time is now to really start to engage youth around intimate partner violence, invite them to be taking a position on this issue, and to bring them into the movement against it, because, these are our future people, and they're already experiencing and dealing with these issues now in their dating relationships. So I can't stress the importance of early intervention and having these conversations with our youth now.
So, Christine, I just want to jump in for a second there, because there's so much there I'd want to unpack, and we could probably talk for a whole long period of time. Yeah. First thing that was coming to my mind was that you're a violence treatment center, mm-hmm. and somebody comes in with physical injuries or psychological injuries, and it's a result of domestic violence. You're there to treat them, and what do you do about the relationship? Like, people go to the hospital, get fixed, go back home, but this is.
Yeah, I mean, people present all along the continuum, right? So some people come in having left their partner, and this is continuing to happen in the post-separation period or post-breakup period. People come in and then wish to return to that abusive situation, which of course is a conversation and ultimately their choice. People come in when often after a situation where there's been injuries, often police have been involved, whether the person's called or a neighbor's called or so on, and then there's a no contact term in place, so not immediately that person is then prohibited from having contact with the abusive partner, and sometimes they're ready for that and sometimes they're not, so that's another conversation. When that happens, the rug of your life is essentially pulled out from under you as you're now grappling with the new reality, whether you were ready for it or not, as I said. So so that's it. I mean, exiting an abusive relationship is a process. It's a journey. It takes many times often for somebody to decide to leave, and people are at different stages. And like I said, even post-separation, many women, people of all genders deal with, especially when there's children involved, continued IPV through access to children, or just from a partner who, continues to stalk them and carry out their campaign even when the relationship is over. So
yeah. The other thing that's just coming to my mind is, okay, someone comes in and there's an assault. I guess, we've got Staff Sergeant Hatchborn here to talk about from the Waterloo Regional Police Services perspective. I'm imagining that there's interconnections with all of these different groups that we have here with us today in terms of referrals or contacts. Or the other thing that's just coming to my mind is, okay, someone comes in and there's an assault, I guess.
Well, that's it, Rob. So many of us, at least probably half of us here are part of the Family Violence Project, which are
Yes.
co-located services for intimate partner violence. So with the right consents in place, we walk down the hall and can chat with each other, share cases,
Yeah.
pull in each other's resources and services where we need to, because we all play a part. Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah, and it's interesting. The other aspect that we often don't think about is youth and social media. Young teens and what they're going through. Obviously, then that's more a mental health issue, no doubt, I guess, or there's self-harm issues there. So, just briefly, can you just touch on that for a second? Yeah, and it's interesting. The other aspect that we often don't think about.
Well, I wouldn't say mental health or self-harm are necessarily elements. I mean, youth are trained up in the culture that they're trained up in to take on these sort of norms around toxic masculinity and what they're entitled to in relationships, and these dynamics play out in youth relationships the same way they do in adult relationships. And sometimes mental health is a piece of it, and certainly the survivor needs, or the victim needs, however you want to word it, needs that often will need mental health or emotional health support in follow-up. But yeah, with youth, there's a lot of different complexities at play.
Okay, Christina, thanks a lot, Christine, for that. I want to turn it over to Jen Hutton. Jen is the CEO of Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. In partnership with the community, Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region empowers and supports women and children to move beyond violence and abuse through the provision of safe shelter, education, and outreach services. Women's Crisis Services operates 2 emergency shelters, and Selma House in Kitchener and Haven House in Cambridge. And that's just a tip of the iceberg of all the various things. But so, Jen, I'm going to throw it over to you now.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rob. So as Rob mentioned, I'm Jennifer Hutton, the CEO of Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. Thank you so much to everyone who's joining us this evening. And as you can tell already, this is heavy stuff that we're talking about. So just make sure you take good care of yourselves, knowing that this content is heavy and can weigh heavy on folks. So just take good care of yourself. So first, I want to start with giving a bit of an overview of what Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region does, what we provide the community. So we have safe shelter, and we have that in a few different ways. We have Selma House in Kitchener and Haven House in Cambridge, and those shelters are 45 beds each. So we have 90 violence against women shelter beds in our region. We are, if not the largest, one of the largest in the province. And then our most recent housing addition is Aspen Place. And Aspen Place was something, a new property for us that we purchased a little bit over a year ago. And actually, we've been running it, I should say, now a year. And Aspen Place is a triplex for transitional housing. What we had found in shelter is, especially during the pandemic and the affordable housing crisis, is that families are staying in shelter for longer and longer periods of time. When I started in this work 10 years ago, I would be telling you that our length of stay is, 6 weeks, 8 weeks before people are moving on to affordable housing. And now it's, 5 months, 6 months, and that's still pretty good. We've had families stay with us upwards of a year. So Aspen Place allows us to move families into supportive transitional housing to be that second stage. So they've had the stabilization of shelter, but they don't need it any longer, and they're ready to move on to semi-independent. So that Aspen Place is small, but it served at least I think 9 moms and 18 kids already. So that model seems to be working pretty well. And at any one time, about 50% of our residents are children in shelter. We also provide outreach services in our community. We see about 1,100 folks through that program. That's for women and gender diverse individuals. And with that service, people can reach out to us and get connected to an outreach worker. And they're seeing that outreach worker usually in a week or 2 weeks. It's quite quick turnaround. And the outreach worker can really meet that person where they're at. And I mean that figuratively and literally. If people want to meet in the community, if it's safe to meet in the home, if they want to come to the Family Violence Project, then all of that can happen. And it's quite a flexible and accessible program, which is really important for those that we serve. And the way to access our supports, whether it's shelter or outreach services, is to call our 24/7 support line. So the numbers are there. And we also, during the pandemic, we added an online chat feature that is available through our website. So our programs, we like to say that we're much more than shelter. We really try to have a wraparound service. In shelters, we have music therapy, we have child and youth programs, we have an addictions and mental health support worker. We run a number of groups, food and nutrition program, and we also have a lot of groups and stuff happening in the community. And some of that's much more of a prevention type nature, such as a youth education program, and working quite closely with partners such as Family and Children's Services, where we have a worker in our shelter and we have one of our staff in the Family and Children's Services building. So I just wanted to share a little video clip with you. Some of you may have heard about our She Is Your Neighbor project. That originally started as a podcast, and most recently we've added a short documentary. So I was just going to share a quick clip of that, and then you can find the full documentary, which is only 7 minutes. Available on YouTube.
When there's awareness, then action can follow.
People don't understand that keeping the secret and not talking about it's harboring our perpetrators.
I really do think that we all have a role to play in ending domestic violence.
We need people to feel like, oh, this is something I want to be on board with. This is something I care about. This is something I'm proud to talk about supporting.
That's kind of the next step. We need to go into action.
I wanted to give you just a little sense of what we've been doing through our She Is Your Neighbor project. And some of the people speaking here today has been guests on our podcast. And with that podcast is really around looking at the complexity and the many intersections of domestic violence, which is a little bit of what you're getting here today as well. And then, of course, with the short documentary, we did that with local company Digital Sabbath. And again, a really good tool to raise awareness. And it actually was shown, I believe, last week in New York at a film festival and won an award in the Hamilton Film Festival. So pretty cool way to raise awareness. But awareness is step one. And as I say in there, our next step is really around action and how we move this growing awareness, because I do believe that people are becoming more aware of the issue. But how do we move more to action? So why are we calling domestic violence an epidemic? Well, here's some numbers to tell you exactly why. 1 in 3 women worldwide have experienced physical or sexual violence, mostly by an intimate partner. Every 6 days, a woman in Canada is killed by an intimate partner. Yet we know that 70% of domestic violence is not reported. And there's a huge cost to this issue. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten. And when we talk about the importance of funding prevention and upstream, is because this is a costly issue. Like the ultimate cost, of course, is cost lives, which Christine alluded to, and I'll talk about a little bit more. But it's also huge costs on emergency services. It's huge costs on employers because there's lots of issues around lost time. So I think that's just something important to consider, is just this significant cost that is associated with this issue. And just again, noting that it comes in many forms. So kind of dovetailing back to the podcast, we had a specific series focused on femicide. And we're starting to hear that term used a little bit more often. Unfortunately, there was a femicide earlier this week in Windsor, and the media actually used the term femicide, which is again something new that seems to be coming. And this is really linked to gender. This is intentional killing of women and girls simply because they're women and girls. And oftentimes when a woman is killed, it is from a loved one. Whereas when men are killed, it's typically maybe an acquaintance, could be more likely a stranger, but women and girls are definitely more likely to be killed by those closest to them. So last year in Ontario, there were 52 femicide in 52 weeks. This year, there's already been 55 femicides in 48 weeks. There was 9 in Ontario in October. Of course, was included in that was the family from Sault Ste. Marie. So, and November, unfortunately, is not looking good either. OAITH, which is our Ontario Association of Interval and Transition Houses, does a monthly count and provides a bit of a snapshot. And again, that is just so that we have a sense of what's going on. This has really been a hidden issue. We would hear about women being killed, and you might hear a statement like, there's no concern for public safety. This is a huge concern for the public. This is a public issue. And it's often because it's was a femicide from a family member. These deaths are definitely predictable and preventable. And there's factors that that's important to be aware of, because as much as 70% are not reporting it, it's usually 80 to 85% of friends or family are aware of this, but yet they don't know what to do. So with that, I also encourage people that's worried about a loved one to reach out to our crisis line, because there is signs, there's red flags that people need to be aware of and look for. And then I'm just going to wrap it up with one tiny quick plug that this Saturday we're doing a walk, and I'm hoping to have lots of people come out wearing purple, the domestic violence color. And we're walking 6 kilometers because every 6 days a woman in Canada is killed by an intimate partner. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen, for that. And yeah, I was going to make sure that we mentioned the fundraiser that's coming up, because, you know, we can talk, but we need money to go to various social agencies and every place else to work on this issue. And that's why we're trying to get the Ontario government to acknowledge it as an epidemic, so that resources get put towards this issue. I just saw there was a comment in the chat from Charlotte Hendricks. So I think when you were talking about your residences, her question was, why are the stays longer?
Yeah, that's really attached to the affordable housing crisis. So that housing is just not turning over. There's not enough supply available. So people are having to wait longer. And previously we would have some residents that could afford market rent, that may not be able to afford market rent any longer. So that means that they stay in shelter because they don't have anywhere else to go until
Yes.
something opens up.
And that's the great backup that's happening. The transitional housing is getting backed up, and it's hard to move people places because there's no place to move them to, and so hence the need for more spaces. On the femicide question that Charlotte has, maybe we'll get later when Staff Sergeant Hatchborn is speaking to talk briefly about that and murder charges. Okay, Jen, thank you very much. Now we'll go to the next speaker. Next speaker will be Sarah Robertson. Sarah is a former director on the board at Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. She's employed in the child welfare sector and is a survivor of intimate partner violence. She is an advocate for supports and resources for families that have experienced violence and seeks to improve how we assess risk to women and children. And interestingly, one of the topics that Sarah will be talking about is coercive control. And interestingly, too, Sarah and I were discussing this, and I saw recently that I think it was an MPP was talking about introducing, I don't know, was it an MP or an MPP, maybe an MP, introducing some legislation to combat or deal with coercive control because her own sister was going through a situation. So very timely topic and issue, and it's something very important. So Sarah, thanks for being with us tonight, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jen and Christine, for starting us off on this very intense topic. Of course, I'm listening and there's so many great points that have already been made, and we still have lots of speakers ahead of us to talk more about the different components of domestic violence. As Rob mentioned, I have experience as a survivor of domestic violence. And so I was thinking about, what would be important to share that might be a little different than the other speakers tonight. And so I was trying to reflect on some of the key things that were part of my experience and even now still trying to cope with as a survivor. And included in that is understanding coercive control, because quite frankly, even though I was in the system and I did training, I never really saw the signs until I was well into the situation. And why is that? Is that a very common starting point for domestic violence involves love bombing. And that's an expression you may or may not have heard yet, but really it's about this extreme pouring of affection and intense romance and signs of, indicators, you think, of love at the onset. And it happens very quickly. And it is with the intention of manipulation, but you don't really understand that. I mean, most of us are humans, we want to be loved in connections and have connections with others and in meaningful relationships. And so if you're not exposed to it, and I was not, I was raised in a home where my parents were intact and I never saw them fight. I certainly never saw any kind of signs of what I understand to be domestic violence now. And so as I got into this relationship and the love bombing started, I was well in, as I said, into some components of coercive control that I didn't really understand what's happening. And the reasons for that is coercive control is a really insidious pattern of manipulating a partner, and it starts very slowly with subtle things that you can't quite put your finger on, but your gut kind of starts to tell you that something might be off, but you don't really get it, and you start trying to convince yourself that it's not there. And that is all part of the process. And along with that comes isolation or attempts for isolation and breaking down some of those healthy connections you have outside of your intimate partner relationship. And that's all very intentional as well, because the partner is trying to isolate you from those that would point out certainly that there's some dysfunction in the relationship. So as that's happening, you start to second guess yourself. And so the power and ability to sort of manipulate and control increases over time. And before you know it, you've really have actually lost some sense of your footing and start a lot of self-doubt. There's you might have heard of gaslighting, which is also part of that sort of intentional creation of self-doubt and even challenging whether some things that you're seeing is really real. And so as that happens over time, you are certainly the risk for violence increases. And coercive control, you've heard there's physical violence, there's emotional violence, psychological violence, there's financial violence and sexual violence. So there's so many components, and coercive control can be one of the layers on top of those, or it can exist on its own, because really until separation was sort of on the horizon in that relationship, there wasn't any clear indicators of violence. I could certainly see red flags, and I could see the increased worry and fear that I had for myself, but I didn't immediately experience that violence. And then I had children, and so it becomes a whole other thing when you're trying to worry about your own safety, but also your children's safety, and plan for separation at that time. And so if I can talk a bit about that, even that's pretty intense, and it takes a lot of time. And for anyone that might be on the line that is dealing with this as an issue, please know that we're here for you and can support you. But it's also really important to start accessing the supports of family and friends, your neighbors, to be a part of that separation plan, because there is one of the highest parts of in domestic violence where the risk is at its highest for lethality is at separation. And that was quite true. I could certainly see the steady increasing worries, but at the point of separation, it was significantly higher. And it was places like Women's Crisis Services, where late at night when it was difficult to sleep, I would call the 24/7 distress line and just talk with someone so that they could be there on the other line. And I can't tell you how huge that is. So please access those supports as well, because you really do need them in that time to plan. And it's also very difficult for people to understand that what coercive control over time in terms of increasing those risks. And so some of the behaviors that start to become more evident, or as red flags, would be stalking and harassment. You're getting 20 to 30 calls a day. Now, fortunately, this was about 20 years ago for me, but nowadays with texting and cell phones and social media and trackers, there's a whole other level of stalking and harassing that can exist. And it's and so being conscious of that, if you're a supporter of a person that is to their safety plan, then just being aware of those possibilities, looking out for the anomalies, and when they're talking about feeling fearful for their lives, that's a really key indicator that there is a significant threat of harm. And so helping to support them through that process, because it can be quite intense. So some of the other even in the family court system, which is a challenge, and I think David will talk a little bit about this, is trying to put forward that experience so that you have the support to manage access to your ex-partner. And that's quite a challenge in and of itself. Fortunately, a lot has changed, and there is some really positive things that are happening. And with Kira's Law, which I believe David's going to talk about, there's some really good things that will help judges to understand the potential for risks, and some of those red flags are. That's a reminder that I was at 7 minutes, so that's good to know. I've got my own timer going, Rob, so I'll pick it up a bit. Some of the other risk factors that you might want to consider, I think Jen was flagging them a bit, and that is, access to weapons, if there has been threats. Strangulation or choking is certainly a factor. And like I said, probably the most significant one to listen for is if the victim actually is expressing fear of being killed, or for that of their children or their family, because your gut instincts are usually 100% bang on, and we stop listening to them. We actually tell kids to stop listening to them sometimes. And so I think it's really important for us to help our kids to understand, and thanks, Christine, for highlighting that, what a healthy relationship is, and how to, so that young people are facing a lot of other stressors and pressures, and there is an increase in intimate partner violence. That's really important that we're talking about it today. So it's just to wrap up, for safety planning, if you're needing that support. Some of the things to think about is developing that circle of support, having documenting the interactions, making sure that you maybe break up your routine. You can have someone even park the car in your driveway, just to make it seem like there's somebody else present all the time. Setting really clear boundaries. I think as a survivor for a period, it was great for me. I thought that I had some ability to manage out the risk factors, maybe trying to control it a bit, and you really don't. You have no control over the behaviors of another person, and it's really important for you to set some clear boundaries for yourself. And having a code word is also something that can be helpful for you and your children if you need to have that as part of your safety plan. And support, be if you know of a survivor or know that somebody's going through it, be there for them, be a listening ear, be that late night phone call, be a neighbor. It was certainly a huge thing. She is your neighbor was a really pivotal moment in my healing journey. It has taken 20 years to move through it, literally, and I'm still not there yet, I can tell you that for sure. But something like She Is Your Neighbor really helped break down the shame that most survivors are carrying. And so it's really important to listen if you can, and help support projects like Women Crisis Services and some of the other social services you'll hear about tonight. So thank you for the opportunity, Rob, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sarah, for that. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. I just, as you were talking and, about people who are victims and reaching out, I was just wondering, what's your perspective on people who think someone is going through something, like a family member or a friend thinks someone is going through that period of coercive control or domestic violence? What do they do? Do they reach out to the individual, even though that individual's not reached out to them? What do you say there?
I do think that if you are worried or you have red flags that you might be seeing, I think there is gentle ways, and I say gentle because it is tough to navigate those conversations. But I think there is ways to, you reach out to the people that you care about. Even if it's simply to say, if you need anything, I'm here. If you need a place to go to, I'm here. If you just need an ear, so even, no judgment. And to support them. And it is a rocky journey, but lots of people leave and go back because of that fear and the risks that are associated with separation. It is very hard to stay out of the relationship because you actually might feel ridiculously safer in it because you think you have that ability. So really,
no, totally understand.
People through that.
Sticking with people through that. Well, we were just talking about the housing situation. If you want to escape from that, where are you going to go to? It's hard to find a place to go to. But thank you very much, Sarah, for sharing that, for providing some of the, the signs, indicators, and providing with some thoughts about getting out of those situations or how we can help people that are in those situations. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Providing some of the, the signs, indicators, and providing with some thoughts about getting out of those situations or how we can help people that are in those situations. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Staff Sergeant Amy Hatchborn. Staff Sergeant Hatchborn has been a police officer with the Waterloo Regional Police Service for the past 20 years. Currently, she is the Staff Sergeant of the Intimate Partner Violence Unit, which is comprised of 20 investigators, 2 sergeants, and detectives assigned to focus on early intervention and high-risk offenders. And I guess there's no greater indicator of how serious this issue is in a community than the fact that there's a full investigative unit within our Waterloo Regional Police Services dedicated to this issue. So, Staff Sergeant Hatchborn, thanks for being with us tonight, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm going to start my timer as well. I was speaking with the KW Zonto Women's Group last night, and I was supposed to speak for 30 minutes, and I looked down at my watch and it had been 55. So it's a topic that I'm very comfortable talking about, and sometimes I can be a little long-winded. I just wanted to start by talking a little bit about where we're located, because I think it's a big part about our success. So we are located in the Camino Health and Wellbeing Building on Queen Street South. It's the Intimate Partner Violence branch, our early intervention branch, and our youth protection branch is also located there. It's not a police building. We're the only branches that are not located in police buildings. And I think it's a very comfortable, neutral location for victims to come in and speak with police. As some of the other speakers have talked about, we're co-located with other members of the Family Violence Project, and we work together to provide victims wraparound support, counseling, safety planning, information on emergency shelter, and then also our youth protection branch works hand in hand with Child Witness, and their advocates, because a lot of kids are obviously witnesses to what goes on in their home, and so that is a partnership that we're very proud of as well. We've been here since 2006, and we're super proud to be a part of this group. We are one of the busiest branches in the Waterloo Regional Police Service. On average, we are laying over 3,500 charges a year, and that's about 1/4 of the total charges for the entire police service. So anyone who applies to work for the Intimate Partner Violence branch comes in knowing that they will be working very hard, and they definitely earn their keep here. Intimate partner violence is an area that the Waterloo Regional Police Service is focused on investing in. So Rob talked about how we have 20 investigators on the floor that investigate intimate partner violence occurrences. And then for 2024, we'll be adding 4 new investigators. So because of the workload, the service recognizes the need to grow. It's exciting for our officers who are working here, as we're going to be able to kind of balance their workloads a little bit better and become more manageable. It's also exciting for the victims that we deal with, because we're going to be able to provide better customer service to them. I want to talk a little bit about our early intervention branch. Currently, we have 3 members who are a part of early intervention and our high risk area. And WRPS is investing in preventative initiatives to try and intervene before criminal offenses take place. So beginning in June 2022, we started a pilot project with Women's Crisis Services of Waterloo Region. And that pilot project involved a detective being paired with an outreach worker. Each day when the detective came into work, they would review all the calls for service, all the intimate partner violence calls. And what they were looking for was 3 calls for service for intimate partner violence incidences between a couple over a 3-month span. And these are non-criminal incidences. So these are not calls where people are getting arrested or where criminal charges are happening. These are non-criminal incidences, but sometimes things tend to get worse as they go along, especially as Sarah mentioned, when there's this pending separation. So the goal here was to intervene before we got to criminal activity. So the outreach worker and the detective would meet weekly. They would contact the couples by phone. The police would educate about what happens when charges are laid. The outreach worker would provide and offer supports. And then they also had discussions about the root causes of what was causing intimate partner violence or arguments in their relationship. If the officer and the outreach worker were unable to reach the couple by phone, then they would we'd assign someone to go out with the outreach worker from our office on foot, and we'd go and knock on doors. So we're really doing everything we can to connect with these couples and offer our assistance. The feedback from the couples who participated has been really positive. And then in January of 2023, we changed the criteria from 3 incidences in 3 months to 2 incidences in 2 months, because we felt we had the capacity to reach more people. And the result at the end of the pilot was a reduction in calls for service from these couples, a reduction in the charges laid, for couples who participated in early intervention, and overall satisfaction from those involved in an early intervention. So currently, the spot filled by the detective is a temporary accommodated position. So at this point, we're going to be asking for this to be made a permanent position sometime in 2024, because we just saw such value in this program. Looking forward to the future, obviously, there's never any shortage of work. And obviously, we are big on risk management. I can tell you that today, most of my day was spent trying to manage some risk from an incident that was happening in town. But we also are shifting our focus as much as we can to providing education, because the more the community understands about intimate partner violence, the more that we can help each other, the more the community can help, the more our neighbors can look out for us, our friends, and when they know what they're looking for, we can hopefully intervene before things become criminal.
So Amy, is it okay if I call you Amy?
Of course, yes.
Staff
Please.
sergeant's a lot, but anyway, thank you. I like the preventative concept, and I was just wondering, it's an officer and a outreach worker together. What is the what is the do they provide other services or access to services or make recommendations to services?
Yeah, so the police part of it is the education part, because I think a lot of people, especially young people, don't really understand what could happen if things get to the point of criminal charges. If a criminal charge is laid, it involves an arrest. It may mean being held in custody overnight or for a period of time. It could mean a release document, which always has conditions on it, which can affect where you live and who you're allowed to contact. So the police provide information about that part. And then from Women's Crisis Services, from Jen's team, they talk about what services are available, whether it's counseling, whether it's emergency shelter, safety planning. I think what happens is they discuss with the couple and kind of get a sense of what sort of things they might need, and then make recommendations based on their conversations.
And just to touch base on a question from Charlotte Hendricks earlier about do reported femicide cases end in murder charges? Are you able to comment on that?
I can. So if the offender is still alive, then they would most certainly be charged with murder. A lot of times what we see is that the offender takes their own life, but certainly if the offender is still alive, then yes, there would be homicide charges laid by the police.
Okay. All right. Well, Amy, thank you very much for your information, and there'll probably be some more questions later on. I won't comment on Christmas decorations before December 1st, but anyway, thank you very much for that.